All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us today for another exciting conversation brought to you by Arkansas Global Changemakers and Graduate Net Impact. We are thrilled to be here to host our featured speaker, Dhu Thompson, the founder, former owner, and past chairman of the board of Delta Plastics. I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you about the partners behind this conversation series. The Arkansas Global Changemakers Initiative, founded by Walton College of Business faculty member Rogelio Garcia Contreras and Fulbright College faculty member Lawrence Hare, brings global communities together to enhance local approaches to global challenges. The initiative brings together faculty, students, and local and international community partners to learn about innovative, viable, and scalable solutions far from home that can help us to address the social issues faced in our own community. Rogelio will be moderating today's event with the help of Cash Acree, one of our own Walton College finance faculty with a passion for finance and entrepreneurship. I'm happy to co-advise our Graduate Net Impact chapter with Rogelio and Meredith Adkins. Graduate Net Impact is a leading student voice for this initiative as a global chapter-based organization full of students seeking to make a positive impact for people and planet, and who embrace the power of business to build a more sustainable world. These students helped to organize this event, and I'd like to introduce them briefly. Some of them may not be on the call today, but I'll run through them. We have Madison Holden, our current Graduate Net Impact president, Alana Collins, who will be our president for the next term, Merritt Ray, the Graduate Net Impact Director of Communications, Mark Howard, who leads our People, Profit, and Planet Consultancy Project team, which also includes Prathamesh Vandekar and Gershagon Kandola, and Olga Koryakova, who manages the conversation series and helps make sure our events like these run smoothly. Thank you to both the students and faculty for the work you're doing in this space. This event is intended to be interactive. If you have any questions while Mr. Thompson is speaking, please put them in the chat. A little later in today's segment, moderators will call on some of you to ask your questions live. And finally, I would like to welcome Dean Matt Waller, the Dean of the Sam M. Walton College of Business and the Sam M. Walton Leadership Chair. As a teacher, innovator, and advocate for the Walton College faculty, staff, and students, we can't think of anyone more perfect to introduce today's speaker. Dean Waller, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you so much. It really is my pleasure to be able to introduce Dhu. I wish every student at the University of Arkansas could hear this tremendous story you're about to hear. You know, when you think about business strategy, I think the strategy that Dhu came up with for this company is remarkable. It should be known globally because it's really a great example of how you can use a sustainable approach to sustainability through business. There's so many interesting points that can be taught through this. In fact, we've had a number of faculty write business cases and do research on this, but it's used as an example in the Walton College quite often. But let me tell you a little bit about Dhu. Dhu Thompson graduated from Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe, Louisiana, with a BA in liberal arts. He's also a graduate of LSU School of Banking. Thompson was in the banking industry for over 16 years and was vice president and head of private banking with Bank One in Monroe, Louisiana, when he left that industry. But I will say I've been around Dhu enough. Of course, I've visited his factory and I've talked with him quite a lot over the years. I actually think his experience in banking was really good for what he created in Delta Plastics because, you know, being able to think about it from a financial perspective is really critical. And you'll see that as we listen to him. But in 1996, Dhu founded Delta Plastics of the South in Stuttgart, Arkansas. Thompson is the founder, former owner, and past chairman of the board of Delta Plastics. Delta Plastics is a manufacturer of poly irrigation tubing for the agricultural industry. They're also the largest recycler of plastic in the state of Arkansas, producing Post Consumer Resin for both internal use and other industries. And one of the things you'll see as you listen to this is how, inputs can be used, outputs of one part of the production can be used as inputs to the other. And they call that closed loop supply chain management. Thompson is also former owner and past chairman of Revolution Bag, a manufacturer of EPA-compliant trash can liners. Thompson and Delta Plastics are the recipients of the Arkansas Business of the Year Award in 2003 and 2010, Corporate Conservationist of the Year, Keep Arkansas Beautiful Award, Keep America Beautiful Award, SBA Person of the Year for 2004, and Arkansas Business Executive of the Year. And students, I would really encourage you to take notes on this. This is an example of something that you'll be able to use many years later in your careers. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dhu Thompson.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate all that and appreciate the accolades. I'll try to live up to it. I think in life, the best way to learn is through stories. So if you'll let me, I first thank you for this phenomenal opportunity. If you'll let me tell the story of how all this got started and what we tried to design. And I am receptive to any question at any point because it covers a lot of breadth on not just the financial side, but also in the business model, but also sustainability. So with that, this is how it began. I acquired Delta Plastics in 1996. In 93, 12 individuals had come together and borrowed $5 million from Arkansas Capital Corporation with the idea that they were going to make a product for agriculture called poly irrigation tubing. The thing about that particular product, two things. One, it was growing in use with the agricultural industry. And those individuals had a vision that it was going to be the dominant way that farmers would irrigate in the South. The second was it was a product that the farmers usually used only once a year. So it was going to become a big environmental issue of putting plastic in the environment. There was real no way to discard it. And they were exactly right. So with that, that was the cornerstone of starting the business. And but this is how it worked. I did not dub closed loop business model, someone else did, but the model is such. We made a product, in this case, poly irrigation tubing. We sold it to distributors. In turn, the distributors sold it to farmers, the end users. There were many other companies that did this in the industry. The difference was we said we would pick up their trash, the used tubing, because we figured out or worked towards figuring out how to convert that old tubing that was fraught with soil and vegetative matter and run it through a system that we spent millions of dollars developing and making a post-consumer resin. So with that, we made an agricultural product. We sold it to distributors who then sold it to farmers. And then we contacted the end user to clean up his farm. I want you to make note of that because what that does is we use the farmer to guide our sales and direct our sales because we were providing a service that nobody else did. So a farmer would walk into a chemical company where they would buy their fertilizer seed and tubing and say, we don't want any other product in the tubing industry other than Delta Plastics because they're going to clean up our farm. And that was a huge issue as far as beginning to dominate the market. Now, the challenge as an entrepreneur is nobody in the United States was able to wash plastic that dirty. And in lied the challenge of millions of dollars and much research, putting all the money that we made back into a wash line to make that a reasonable cost of production. so we could compete. So therefore, the model was there, and we would sell the tubing, reclimate it, run it through this wash system, make post-consumer resin. We would use some of that resin in our product, but then we would sell it into the industry. Sounds simple, but it's not. Lost $1.4 million my first year in business. Lost about $750,000 my second year in business. Third year in business, about $500,000. Fourth year, relatively broke even. And fifth year, started to make a little bit of profit. So it's staying the course. It's believing in your vision, and just continued efforts of not wavering left or right. From that, we did several other things on the sustainable side, and that is I started another company called Revolution Bag, and we were manufacturing garbage bags that were just garbage bags. And I want you to know there's thousands of different types of garbage bags. I knew I couldn't compete against Glad or Clorox on the retail nature or the retail shelves. So therefore, what we did is we followed the science on sustainability. And when you get into sustainability, it's all about following the science and the numbers to prove yourself out. There's a huge amount of, I mentioned earlier, sustainability is a buzzword, and there's a huge amount of industries that tout it. But if you cannot prove it out scientifically, it has no merit. And that's key. So even today, in investments in private equity groups or whatever, there's a big push towards what we call responsible investment. And what that means is that investment needs to have a sustainability orientation towards it. And that's the way the world is moving, is environmentally. With the garbage bags, the market we were able to produce garbage bags out of 100% post-consumer resin, and that had of the correct quality. And what it did was we then went to industries or groups that wanted lead tax credits. So we were able to produce a garbage bag with the smallest carbon footprint in the United States. And so who would we go get as customers? Not just your normal retail environment. We had New York City schools, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, a huge amount of universities, all the casinos in Las Vegas, MD Anderson, Library of Congress, et cetera, because if they purchased our bag, they could show a much reduced carbon footprint, therefore they could acquire lead tax credits. So that's how I did not compete against Glad and Clorox and the everyday garbage bag manufacturer. I created my own market, and it was all based on sustainability. So when you look at a business, and Matt made a good point, my background in banking was significant in being able to read financial statements and to be able to read credits, such as in our interpretation of banking, commercial credits. That was imperative. But when you take off as an entrepreneur, it's 180 degrees as opposed to banking. I'm very fortunate that I had a good banking background, but then all of a sudden you're sitting on the other side of the desk. And that's what people don't understand, because you're trying to follow your vision with something you totally believe in, but you have to have banking. And I will tell you, when I lost 1.4 million my first year in business, probably the only reason I stayed alive was because the bankers that I had knew me really well and they believed in me. And that was significant. Relationships are very significant, that you have that kind of trust with financial institutions. So it's the little things that you learn. Like one, when you have a business, is cash is king. It's cash that repays loans. And you have to have loans and revolving lines of credit to be able to function. But you never take your eye off your cash position. And many people lose that thought. And because especially with rates as low as they are in this environment, it's easy to borrow money. But I also was a banker during the 80s when Fed funds and prime rates got in the 20s. And that long-term debt, where people had borrowed a lot of money, actually absolutely strangled those businesses and companies because they were paying so much interest. We hadn't had that since the 80s. What we're looking down the barrel of now is rates are very low. It's a great opportunity to expand, but you need to remember with inflation, rates will go up. And when rates go up, your interest rate will go up. And your cash interest that you have to pay will go up. So there's a lot of maneuvering around and things you need to keep your eyes on different balls. Excuse me. We talked about, people ask me about managing my company, and it was pretty simple. I went to, I had significant department heads, and I was probably the only plastic manufacturer that had analysts. I had a group of analysts that would study markets before I would go into them, and we would vet them very carefully. As to my department heads and management, I just look for diversity of opinion. And what I mean by that is I will never embarrass anybody as to any type of opinion. There's always people that are a lot smarter than you. You don't need to be intimidated by someone's intellect. You just need to learn from it. But you need their opinion. And if you can manage through a diverse opinion, you will come to the right solutions. If that person's just quiet and non-contributory, you need to think, are they really engaged? So paying attention, being engaged with as an employee matters. And that gets you way down the road as to the development of your company. The other thing is, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit, is marrying the sustainability to your financial performance. And it's not easy. You can spend a lot of money on sustainability and not get the financial reward back. Where that reward ends up coming is when you sell. And that's a fine balance. So I'll give you an example. In the irrigation side, there was a software program on how to irrigate that was significantly efficient. And it was financial algorithms of friction water running through pipe. And it was developed by civil engineers. It never took off, but it was a great program. So I contacted the 3 civil engineers, asked for permission to take it over, and ended up spending another $4 million to develop that program. It's a game changer in irrigation. Simply put, there's 5.5 million irrigated acres in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri. That's the Mississippi Delta. That is the delta of the Mississippi River. If all farmers that irrigate with poly irrigation tubing and irrigate that 5 million use that program, we would save 1.3 trillion gallons a year that would not come out of the aquifer. When I ran the financial model and I saw how much it saved the farmer financially, we put together a business model to charge the farmer, because it would save him significant dollars, at least 25 to 50%, 25% minimum, usually around 40 or 50% in cost. But the market was not willing to pay it. But we, what we did after much thought, I donated it for free, and actually hired a group of people that did nothing but educate universities and government groups as to how to irrigate. To this day, the owners of Present with Revolution Plastics still use it because it has such a huge sustainability part in the environment of what it can do. So people who are investors, so for example, private equity groups that I'm associated with, where does the money come? Those private investors that put up the money to go do business acquisitions. The example is Harvard, University of California, pension funds. The Gates Foundation is phenomenally focused on sustainability. The Lego family, they all want sustainability. And they put those funds in particular private equity groups because they believe in the sustainability. So it has a future. It's the way the world is moving, but financially, sometimes it doesn't make sense. You try to make sense of it, but it does have a value. And I hope that makes sense to you. There's even to the extent now there are programs in businesses that are, if you're doing business the right way, you want to be a member of these programs. So for example, there's the Environmental Social Governance Certificate, and you want to be a part of that, showing that you're doing the right thing. And it's numerically and science driven. The one even ahead of that is Principles for Responsible Investing, PRI. And that's when you have to show specific carbon footprints. And you actually have environmental audits quarterly or 6 months out of the year to show your sustainable performance. So overall, the world is moving in that direction. I have a huge amount. I could talk about private equity versus entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is someone with vision, passion, you believe in what you're doing, and don't be intimidated. It's an age-old saying, you're going to learn more from failure than you will from success, and nothing is truer. You just got to keep believing in yourself and moving forward. The other thing is when you put your business together, you need to remember, if you don't have partners, or if you have 51% or more, you own it. And you don't need to forget that you own that business. Because as an entrepreneur, you're going to have ideas and thoughts, and not everybody's going to follow you. So there'll come a point with management, and I've used this example before, that you need to walk in to your department heads and say, today, we're going to paint the building orange. And they're going to look at you, and you want them to give you a rebuttal why not to paint the building orange. But come the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, and you're totally passionate and believe in what you're doing, then you give the directive, paint the building orange. And that's how you move forward, is as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are different. Not everybody believes in what they're doing, but you do, and that matters. I am open to any suggestions. I don't want to run out of my time limit of explanation, but so with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
So thank you, Dhu. I will start with my own, based on our discussions just earlier. I was really taken by some of the comments that you made about sustainability being a buzzword, and about kind of the insincerity in much of the sustainability, ESG, social responsibility, social investing, especially as it is being presented by many companies, especially given that in the last few weeks, we've seen announcements from JP Morgan Chase, they're going to commit 2.5 trillion to sustainable financing by 2030. Bank of America at 1.5 trillion, Citi at 1 trillion. So that's $5 trillion bucks by 2030 that these major banks are contributing to this. But the question remains, right? Is this going to actually go to these greenwash activities? Is everyone going to try to, create the illusion that they are doing things that are sustainable, or are they going to actually be able to deploy this capital in a way that makes a difference? And so my question to you is, given our audience here is, generally interested in trying to affect change in the world, is this a challenge that is going to be best met by these demands from investors? Is it going to come from the customers? How do you solve that riddle? Is it going to come from like a more science-driven approach to the measurement of impact? Where do you see the largest gains to be made?
Cash, I think what I've experienced is if the science is not there, then usually it falls apart. So for example, when we had to get our Post Consumer Resin that we were manufacturing, we had to run through a myriad of tests to show exactly where it came from beginning to end. We had to run through a myriad of tests of the complexities of that particular polyethylene product. And we had to have the numbers behind us from people with the right credentials to say, yes, these people actually do it. So therefore, there's actually, in the plastics industry, there's actually a certification that is difficult to get to because it takes the science. You have to prove everything numerically. But once you get that certification, it's like the gold star or the check that anybody that doesn't even have the education can say, oh, this is correct. It is a valued product. It's been vetted. And like yourself, I have been and seen so much information as to we're saving this many trees or we're saving this much water. And it's easy to put it out there. So you actually have to dig and find out if they have the credentials, certified credentials behind them. And so it's difficult to get through that, but it's necessary because it's so easy to market yourself as being a good guy. I had touched on the part about being pushed towards responsible investments. Actually, private equity groups go through those same certifications to show in their businesses that people privately invest in. So for example, my group is called Arsenal. They're significant. They acquire businesses all over the world. And it could be anything from construction and glass to plastics, et cetera. But they have to prove to the Gates Foundation that every business that they acquire actually does what it says it's going to do through those certifications, or Gates won't invest in it. So it is a constant education, constant education.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We have a couple of questions already in the chat. I'm going to call Nicholas Cross. Nicholas, do you want to post your question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dhu. I really enjoyed getting to hear your aspect on this, especially on the financial side of sustainability. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how you go about selling sustainability and sustainable initiatives as profitable to other consumers, and how, when you know it's profitable from a financial standpoint, how do you demonstrate those savings to a non-technical consumer and convince them that it's a worthwhile investment?
Good question. First, I'm going to tell you that it's hard to make it profitable at times. And you have to take the position, Nicholas, that I've always taken the position, and that is, I never got punished for doing the right thing. So as I'd mentioned with the Pipe Planner, the software program, to this day, it's still not profitable. But in my own terms, I have coined it soft revenue. So, and what I mean by that is when you have groups of farmers that are not willing to pay for it, but they know that they're going to have savings, they're going to go and buy Delta Plastics pipe because they want to save money and they want to save water. But I need to point out something. The first thing people are going to look at is the money. The second thing they're going to look at is sustainability. And I think generationally, that's changing. I think with your generation, you're going to look at the sustainability. I'm not a fan of wind turbines. I think they're destructive. I think they tear up the landscape. It's the biggest cause of death of migratory birds, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just my opinion, Nicholas. You know, they have good things. They generate a lot of electricity. So it comes back to a personal opinion. And the way it made financial sense for me in producing Post Consumer Resin was, and my biggest financial challenge was that I produced a plastic, and the plastic, just for explanation, Nicholas, is a little pellet. When you buy plastic from Exxon, Chevron, Mobil, it comes in a little pellet. And this is the way plastic is made. It is cracked from natural gas, all in the United States. In Europe, it's crude oil. So you have natural gas, which becomes ethylene, which becomes polyethylene. So my challenge was, how can I produce post-consumer resin cheaper than you could buy virgin polyethylene that had better properties? And that I spent millions and millions of dollars traveling Europe, looking at equipment, building the system to where I could continue to lower my cost of production so I could compete against virgin resin. And I eventually became profitable at it. But there were many years I wasn't, because plastics like steel or cardboard or paper is a commodity. And in the commodity market, those things go up, they go back down, they go up, they go back down. They just have economic cycles. So financially, you've got to be able to survive when it's a downward trend. When prices go up, oh, that's good for you. So my point behind this is you have to have a mousetrap or a system that is financially viable if you're going to run the sustainability side, that has reasonable margins. You know, recently I looked at a company that sells seed and fertilizer, and they were looking for equity cash to come in. They were selling, get this, $60 million. They had revenue of $60 million, and they were not breaking even. They gave me a deck, a financial deck that said, we can get this company to 100 million though, and we'll start making some money. Well, my position on it was, as I went back and told them, I said, if you can't be profitable at 60, then you don't need to get to 100. So you need to go back and cut all those expenses and get profitable, because what's going to keep you alive in a business is margins. And the other thing that you never need to take your eye off the ball, and I'm being redundant, is cash. So for example, when people look at the value of your business, they're going to call it an enterprise value. What is it worth in the market? What is that enterprise value? And that basically is your EBITDA times a market multiple. But the real value is going to be the enterprise value minus your debt, and that's going to give you equity value. And that's what you're really worth. But margins are everything, following margins. If you don't follow margins, you'll go broke.
Indeed. Great advice right there. And I love what you said about how there is a shift, apparent shift going on, and the focus of this generation around sustainability versus the financial bottom line. Thank you for that observation. Tatiana also has a question she may want to share.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. My question is specifically about greenwashing, corporate greenwashing, and how prevalent it is. And I'm just curious, why would you say it has such a negative impact from the consumer standpoint? And why do you think it's still so prevalent today?
Ooh, that's a great philosophical question. Everybody greenwashes in this day and time. Everybody does. It goes back to prove it. Does that make sense? It's easy, so easy in marketing and everything else, Tatiana, that everybody has jumped on the bandwagon. But unless it's proven, it's not going to make any difference. And, I'm going to make a point here. Every company has a culture, and that's a big thing. Smaller companies, not so much. And you need to work on that culture. And when I developed Delta Plastics, I had 7 core values. And I'm getting back to your greenwashing and people. And I had the employees, of which at that time were 1,000, come up with the core values like discipline, integrity, etc. And then we didn't use Webster dictionary definitions for those core values. We had the employees define what discipline was. We had them define what integrity was. And my point in telling you that is you have to get your company and everybody that works for you all on the same page to where they live those core values of truth. And there's so many people that do not do that. They just get out there and market it. I'm on a board where they have several significant people who are, for example, and I use this for an example, but put them in the position of they were head of the environmental side for Coca-Cola. They're very smart. They're very good at academia. But if I went back to them and I look forward to getting their opinions, but when they say certain things, I have to have it proven to me and not just talked about. That's hard to do because in this day of social media, you can just get it out there. And unfortunately, so many people just read it and believe it. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. It's just mass dumping in the market. And it's not a good thing. So the good thing is we've got governances where you have to prove it. And that's what you have to follow. Does that make sense? Does that help? I may not have totally answered your question.
Yes, thank you for that.
I think what you're mentioning, Mr. Thompson, is so key at this point in time. There is probably a lot more damage done by those companies that greenwash for the sake of doing so and portray an image that doesn't really reflect on the actions they take on a day-to-day. And that to me speaks volume of the kind of company that you were able to build. So thank you for leading with example.
Well, you're welcome. Just an interesting caveat to that. When you have a manufacturing process, you compete against your neighbor next door because he has a manufacturer. So for example, Delta Plastics was one of the plants started in an industrial park in Little Rock. So I have to have the same wage value as they do, at least to start, to hire proficient people. And a lot of times there's other industries that can pay a higher wage than you can. So what we put together was we took the core values, and it was almost like, for the best comparison, it was like Boy Scouts. When you walked in, or Girl Scouts, when you walked into my company, there was a 2.5-year program that showed you, for talking purposes, you would start at $11.50 an hour, which was the median range in that industrial park. But after 2.5 years, after you follow these steps, all attached to core values, you ended up at $22 an hour. Plus, you probably picked up another $20,000 in extra money. And it was that very clear path that I could give them that separated why people wanted to come to work for Delta Plastics and not ABC Manufacturing here. And that made a huge difference. You have to give people clear, definitive paths, or it just gets lost, or you'll always be competing from behind.
Dhu, I didn't get a chance to tell you this the first time we talked, but actually my family has a farm down in Brummett. And so I called my uncle this morning and I asked him, are we using Delta Plastics for irrigation on the farm? He's like, I'm sure we are. That's the only thing you see around here. And that made me wonder, is the sustainability within that category a huge driver of who picks it up, or is it finance first and they're happy to see sustainability on the back end, but if it would have been 10 cents cheaper, they would have went with a competitor? Like what's the breakdown in the minds of the consumers down there?
Great question. So actually, because of the service we provided of cleaning up the farm, I was able to charge a little more than the competition. So these were their choices. I too, we farm down in Louisiana. So your choices are cash. When you buy one roll of pipe, to give you the magnitude of it, okay? You buy one roll of pipe, it may weigh 220 pounds. A roll is a 1/4 mile long. Let's just say, they're all different millages, but let's just say 1/4 mile long, 10 mil thick, I think it's 280 pounds, okay? That 1/4 mile long irrigates 40 acres square. When that roll is rolled up, after it's laid out in the farm, it's rolled up with soil, corn, soybeans, cotton, whatever you planted. And that roll is going to come back about 550 pounds. It's massive. So you have these massive rolls out on the farm. A small farm will use 20 rolls. A large farm will use hundreds of rolls. So you can imagine the piles of plastic that as the popularity grew in this product. And you and I had the discussion, the reason the popularity grew was because of land leveling in the industry, farming industry, these past couple of decades. And the reason they land level is for chemical application and irrigation, which gives better crop productivity. So really, I was lucky in that I found a product that was growing, that more and more people wanted to do it. So when I went to the market, basically the farmer, he could either bury it, which was against the law. He could burn it, and not many of them wanted to do that because it just melts. Or he could pay tipping fees to landfills. But it all required taking these huge rolls, putting them on a trailer and transporting it to a landfill. So if I was able to just drive up to your farm, had a GPS position that we both agreed on that was safe, and clean up your farm, it's like trash service at your house. It had a huge value because basically I was picking up all your trash, but in this case, it was a lot of trash. But also, it would be when you call, the other thing was you have to perform and do what you say you're going to do. So our goal was, I'll pick it up with no later than within 3 to 7 days. And as we worked towards that, and they knew we were coming 3 to 7 days within the time they called, and we cleaned up their farm, they were willing to pay more. So it was an expense to me that I had to put into my cost of production in manufacturing resin. So simply put, a normal recycler all over the world, he has a product, say plastic, glass, steel, cardboard. He usually buys that out of an industry, the used plastic, the used steel. And then he just converts it to pellets or whatever they're going to convert it to. And he turns around and sells it. I had a different component. I had to go get it, logistics, which was huge. Then I had to run it through a wash system that cost millions of dollars to clean it up. And then I would have to extrude it or do whatever they did, and I got my product. So I had two things, well, really one. I had this significant wash system that was very expensive to run. So I had to constantly work on my cost of production in all facets. The beauty of that is I had a huge amount of opportunity. All my problems were absolutely opportunities to carve out expenses just based on ingenuity and figuring it out. And in light, the opportunity was the problems. That was the opportunity because nobody had ever addressed it. But they would pay more for my product because of the service that I provided.
Mr. Thompson, following up with that, and although you have touched on this perhaps along the almost an hour already that we have here, time has fly. I guess it's a very, very interesting talk. For all the young entrepreneurs out there that are trying to build a business with a positive social and environmental impact, what would be the most critical piece of advice that you would give them based on your Delta Plastics story and experience there?
I'm gonna sound like Walt Disney. Believe in yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, there's going to be a huge amount of naysayers. We run the Governor's Cup, and it's delightful, absolutely a wonderful opportunity. And I'm always amazed at how smart the students are. You and I talked on this. The academic side is phenomenal, and what they lack is experience. And the only way you can get into it is jump in head first. It's the little things. So for example, when you're an entrepreneur, because there are so many naysayers, we have that 90-second elevator pitch at the Governor's Cup, and they have the chance to say it all right there, and it's difficult. The other thing is you can't lose self-confidence in any respect. And I mentioned this before, self-confidence is not the number of likes you get on Facebook or Instagram. That's not self-confidence. Self-confidence is actually accomplishing how small it is, something that is relevant. So it's difficult. It's what separates the men from the boys. You know, Rogelio, my favorite saying, and I'm not trying to, and I actually printed it out, is, and you've probably read it, The Man in the Arena from Teddy Roosevelt. And, you know, I pulled it out because it is the epitome of entrepreneurship. And I actually can read it real quick, which I think is worth it. But even after I read it, I would tell every entrepreneur to go get it and put it on his wall. And it goes like this. It says, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who makes errors, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be without those cold and timid souls who neither know victory or defeat. That is entrepreneurship. I would say you're go get it, print it out, put it on your wall, and read it daily, because you're going to need it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know, Cash, if it's difficult to follow that. I don't know.
I've got
one more question.
Because I've got all the finance angles, right?
Yeah.
So you said that people are going to be looking at enterprise value in valuing these firms in the way that they're looking at sustainability. And I always think of valuation as kind of having, you know, I'm really simple. So it's like there's a numerator effect with your cash flows, and there's a denominator effect with like the multiple you're using, right? And it's just, do you see that sustainability is impacting the way these things are valued, or is it just who's getting valued in the first place? Is it like helping the cash flows or the multiple, or just the fact that you're getting evaluated at all?
It doesn't help in the cash flows, but it does help in the value. Now, I say it doesn't help in the cash flows. If you can prove it out, and I was fortunate enough to prove it out, but it was after millions and millions of dollars and a lot of failures that I was able to produce have a reasonable cost of production on the polyethylene, the resin I produced. And yeah, that was a positive effect to cash because I had reasonable margins. But cash, the sustainability side, it's the way we're living and the way we're gonna live. And that's the future. And again, it goes with people wanting to do the right thing. So the financial side is just that. It's the financial side, whether you're profitable or not. You know, we had talked about the down and dirty of an enterprise value of every industry has a multiple associated with it. Every financial statement has an EBITDA, you know, earnings before depreciation, interest, taxes, amortization. Your enterprise value, roughly speaking, is that industry multiple times your EBITDA. But what the real value, and that is, and people look at that, they will say in meetings, well, my enterprise value is this. But then what is your equity value when it comes down to the financial side of it? So it's enterprise value minus your debt. And that gives you your equity value. So if you're worth 100 million, and you know, that sounds great as an enterprise value, But if you owe 80 and your equity value is only 20, then financially that's your value. But then if you had another 60 million in cash, you add that back because you could pay that 80, pay 60 of that debt off with your 80, of your 80 debt. So, and sustainability doesn't have anything to do with that. Unless part of your company shows that it is making money in that sustainable orientational, in that sustainability department. It's very, very necessary. And the fact that people like Gates and Lego and those other families, that's all they look for. Bill Gates owns 170,000 acres in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Georgia and Florida. You know what they do with the crops after they harvest it? They give it away. Sustainability matters to philanthropists. It matters to philanthropists.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Thompson, this has been a very rich and powerful conversation. Unfortunately, we are approaching to the 60-minute mark.
Good.
And this is all the time we have for today's event. It really went by very, very fast. So I wanna take a moment to thank you for your wisdom and your insightful and rich presentation. Thank you for taking the time to join us and share your experience with our students and the members of our different groups that are interested in sustainability here at the university and making a difference through the power of business and the free market. Thanks as well to you, Dean Waller, for being here with us today. Your presence means a lot for the work we are trying to do. And you were right, this story should be known globally. And this is part of the work that we're trying to do at Arkansas Global Changemakers as we foster multidisciplinary, institutional, cross-sector collaborations through an international network of social innovators, making sure that the knowledge generated through this collective exchange is translated into concrete local action. So many of our partners worldwide will have access to Mr. Thompson's talk this afternoon. And I'm sure, Mr. Thompson, you will inspire many of them. And last but not least, I wanna thank everybody involved in the organization of this event. And my gratitude goes obviously to the Graduate Net Impact Chapter, all the students there, to Tatiana Mendoza and Olga Hokriakova, and of course, my dear colleagues, Meredith Atkins and Lindsay Stader-Mock. And of course, my good friend and colleague, Cash, thank you for doing this with us. Appreciate your presence here today and your insightful questions. And yes, thank you, Cash. And thank you, Mr. Thompson. And here, just to make some announcements on what is coming next and the wonderful work that Net Impact is doing. Our Graduate Net Impact Chapter President, Madison Holden. Thank you, Madison.
Thank you. I definitely want to start by echoing all those sentiments. Thank you all so much for being here. This has been an incredible event itself. It's been such an amazing semester and an incredible year. Thank you, Virgilio and Meredith and Lindsay, for making this what it is. It literally would not exist without you all. As announcements, since I will be graduating here in May, here in just a few days, I am going to be leaving the Graduate Net Impact Chapter, and Alana will be taking over as president for the next year. So we're all super excited about that. We also have a bunch of officer openings that are going to be coming up. So if you have any interest in joining our chapter at all, or even in becoming an officer, look out for the follow-up email, and it'll have a link that you can go to and get yourself registered to help us out on any of our projects, or even, get a heads up on our events in the future, more like this. Thank you all again for being here.
Thank you, Madison. Mr. Thompson, very grateful for your participation. Thank you.
Thanks, Real. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.